Hello and welcome back to the farm. I'm Susie, your host and creator here today. And in today's video, we are going to do some thrift flips. I was so excited to get my studio back in order so that I could do some upcycles for you guys. So I also, in moving, found so many things that I forgot I had, and one was this round clock, and I had been wanting to upcycle it for a while, but couldn't find it. So I found it, and I knew right away that I wanted to put the oak leaves and acorns mold on it. I wanted to do sort of like a wreath on it. I don't have the clock part for it anymore, so it's not going to be a clock anymore. But to use these molds, I'm using IOD air dry clay, and I have just dusted the entire thing with cornstarch. That just makes it easier to remove. And all you do is mix up your clay a little bit, put it into the mold, and then as you can see here, I'm just using my fingers to clean up all the edges. They're real easy to use. There's this little micro rim on them, and basically all you got to do is get the back flat and clean up the edges and let gravity take it out for you. And these molds are so detailed. After you get them out, you can kind of take your finger and pull off any of the little excess parts if you miss cleaning up the edges. Sometimes they come out really clean, but sometimes you'll have to clean them up like that. So I went ahead and made up the entire mold, and then I'm going to arrange them onto the wood frame. To glue them on, I'm going to use Titebond glue, and I'm actually going to layer them over each other. The way you do that is I like to use a paintbrush, and I spread the glue all the way to the edges, and I make sure that there's glue on every part of the mold so we have great contact, and I've never had a mold come off doing this ever. So I'm just going to glue them all on, layering them how I see looks good. I decided to decoupage over the center, so I'm just going to give a couple of quick coats of white paint to the front of this clock. I'm not going to worry about that hole because we're going to cover that up anyway. Once the paint is dry, I am going to decoupage with this napkin. I found these napkins when I was moving, and I've never used them, and really I don't think I've ever decoupaged with, or haven't decoupaged with napkins at least in a long time. But they're real easy to use too, just like the decoupage paper. But these were 3-ply, so I took the 3-plies apart, and you just want to use the top layer. So I centered that give thanks right in the center of the clock piece, and I'm going to decoupage it on. To fill up the sides, I'm just going to rip some more paper and go over it. That's the great thing about these random patterns. You can just layer over it. This is basically oak leaves that have fallen, and I love the colors, and I thought they looked so pretty. Wasn't sure about the give thanks, but I thought that I could add more gold into this project with maybe the Etiquette's full transfer. So I got it all decoupaged down, and I let it dry, and while that's drying, I'm going to come back and paint the frame. The glass did not want to come out. I was afraid I would break it, so I just left it in there. I would prefer just using a razor blade to scrape any paint off the glass anyway. So I wasn't even worried about getting it on the glass because it's easier just to scrape it off. I'm using the color Prairie Sunset. This is a fusion all-in-one paint. And I think this is a pretty yellow for fall, especially when you deepen it up with some aging wax. It's so pretty, and it matched the yellow in the napkin. So I did 2 coats, and I had to use a little detail brush to get in some of those really small parts in between those molds. But I got it all covered, and I just stuck that in there to see how it would look. And I did get a piece of the Etiquette's transfer and put here on the top. I think I finally mastered these transfers. You really do not want to rub hard at all. You just rub really light, and it usually only takes 1 or 2 little passes over them on the words, and it starts to release. And you have to do a bit more lifting and looking on these than the other transfers, because you can kind of feel them release where you can't feel these, if that makes any sense. But this one transferred perfectly, and I just used my fingers to burnish it in. And now I'm going to take some aging wax and go over the entire thing, getting in all those crevices of those molds, and then when we wipe it back, they will stay down in there, and really highlight all those gorgeous oak leaves and acorns. Okay, so the more I looked at the paper and the napkin, the less I liked it. So I turned it over. I'm going to do something different here. Sometimes that's just how things go when you're doing a thrift flip. I had this handkerchief, this linen handkerchief, so I ironed it flat. Believe it or not, it doesn't look like it here, but I did iron it, but it had been folded for so long. I guess them creases are going to stay there, but there is a way to fix that. And like I said, just rub really easy. This one has a lot of little wording, so it took me a while, but it wasn't hard. It just took a minute. So I just gently rubbed over everything and pulled and lifted until I got the entire thing transferred, and I used my finger to burnish it into the napkin. And then I centered it up in the frame, and there you can still see the wrinkle in this. I want to apologize for that. I could not find my spray adhesive, and I had very limited time doing these, so I couldn't even go to the store to get some to finish it. But if you use spray adhesive when you're putting these in, it will flatten them out, and I am going to go get some and complete this. And then I also, y'all let me know if you think this is a good idea, I thought that I would put some floral. There's a little bit of room between the glass and the backing because of the clock part would have had to have room, so I thought that I would put, you know, some oak leaves in there. What you guys think about that? Let's move on to project number 2. I always pick up these silver trays at the thrift store when they are a good price, and I've had this one a while. I knew I wanted to decoupage on it, so I just painted the center of it with white. I think I'm using casement. Casement or Victoria lace is usually my go-to bright white in the fusion colors. And I just went around the bottom part where the paper was going to be, and I tried to follow the natural line of the tray. While moving, I also found all my extra decoupage papers, like pieces of papers that I had not used. And I've had this one for quite some time. I'm going to be using the Fall Farm decoupage paper. I do still have some of these on my website. And it came with a truck and a barn, and this tractor I never used. So I was going to use this tractor. We live on a farm. We've got several tractors, so they always, you know, my YouTube logo is one of our tractors. So tractors is kind of our thing. My husband loves tractors. I started using my fingers just to make an indentation to cut it, but I couldn't see it well enough. So I ended up using a pencil mark, but we will cover that pencil mark. I'm using the Fusion Decoupage and Transfer Gel, and I always like to start with a starter strip on one side and get my paper going and then continue on down. And I also keep a mister bottle handy to mist the paper. That just helps those fibers stretch and release, and it's so easy to work out any wrinkles that way. And then I just continue on down until I have the entire sheet decoupaged onto the tray. So I'm about to get really transparent and real with you guys about today's projects. I didn't like them. I was not satisfied with any of the projects that I did today. And that is one of the downsides of being a creative, is you have to force it sometimes. And unfortunately, because of everything that I have going on right now with trying to get the store ready, my brain is, I guess, kind of in that mode. Organization modes like that, and school starts this week, and I had to go out of town, and I literally had about 3 hours in my schedule where I could film this entire video and put together all these thrift flips. And I was so excited because I want to do them, but then when I sat down and started working on them, nothing seemed to work. Everything just didn't look good. I didn't have time to go back and fix it. And I guess sometimes that happens. But I really, honestly, I thought about just scrapping this entire video and just telling you guys that I'm sorry. But there are some ideas. And just because I don't like how mine turned out as much, and I felt like I made too many little mistakes, you could still get some wonderful ideas. So I decided to go ahead and do this video, and I hope that y'all are not disappointed in me for these projects. They're not terrible, but I just felt like I could have done better, and I was really kind of forcing myself to do these, even though I love doing them. There's just some days where you're just not creative, right? But I had to be creative this day. But anyway, back to this thrift flip. I did end up painting the entire tray with hazelwood. I was going to just do that little center part, but then I didn't like that. So I decided to paint the entire thing, and I only did one coat, and because I kind of liked the way some of that silver would come through that gray just a little bit. And then at the last minute, I didn't like the stark white, where the gray and the white met. So I took the gray and just kind of dry brushed around the edges. And then once all the paint was dry, I went over it with some white wax, went over the entire project with white wax and wiped it back. And I also did the back and cleaned it up. You could also, if you have time, you could glue, not hot glue, but probably use some Titebond glue or Gorilla Glue or something. Put a sawtooth hanger on the back, and that way this could be hung on the wall. Or you can just sit it up behind something, or this would be so cute on top of a kitchen cabinet. For our last project today, I will have to say this one did end up being my favorite. I've had this wood cutting board for a while now, and there's a W on it, but we're going to cover that up. And I found some more pieces of the Fall Botanical. This is from last year's Roycycled Decoupage paper. Instead of painting the wood, because I didn't want that little white halo around it, I didn't want to get any paint on the wood, I decided to go ahead and paint the back of the decoupage paper. You want a white background for your decoupage paper. Just really makes it pop more, unless you're really wanting it to blend in with your wood. So once that white paper dried on the back of the decoupage paper, I just decoupage the way I always do. And once the paint dry, it really makes this paper kind of tougher. And I had a few wrinkles, but they really looked cool the way that they wrinkled on there. And once the decoupage paper had completely dried, I came back with my little finger sander, and in a downward motion, I just sanded off all the excess. And see how there's no white paint now? It's just the paper and then the wood. There was a few places I did have to sand a little bit harder, and I pulled off just a little bit of that stain. And to blend all that in, I'm going to use some of the Fusion Antiquing Glaze. the glaze is different as the wax, as it wipes off a lot more. So that's why I use the glaze, and it stays on that wood really good and hides where I took off a little bit of the stain. And I also took my sander and sanded over all the wrinkles on the paper just to make them look really old and aged. And here's where I'm taking the glaze. I'm just going to rub it around all the edges and just blend all that together and then wipe it back. Also used a little piece of that paper and decoupage onto one of these little wooden tags. I found tons of these in my stash, and so I'm going to start putting tags on everything because they're just so cute anyway. So I finished up this little tag, put some glaze on it, used some string to tie it around the top, and I love how this one turned out. This one's so cute. I even like how the wrinkles look distressed and aged. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's projects. I am only going to be able to do one video this week. Like I said, I have so much going on with trying to get the store ready for the opening date, which I will be announcing soon. So thank y'all so much for watching, and I will see you again next week, I hope.